Welcome. I'm Audrey Chapuis, President and CEO of the Tampa Bay History Center. It's such a pleasure to be with you all tonight for the 17th Annual Duckwall Lecture with one of Florida's most eminent scholars, Dr. Gary Mormino. Gary has drawn a very packed house in Tico Hall tonight, and many of you are joining us virtually on Zoom, so welcome to you as well. We are grateful to the Frank E. Duckwall Foundation for making evenings like this possible, and in particular, thank you to Sandy Reef for your support of the History Center. And here at the museum, we see ourselves as both the memory and the meeting place of Tampa Bay, welcoming thousands of visitors and students each year and bringing people like you together for conversations that help us deeply understand our shared history. So thank you to everyone in this room for animating our mission, being part of that conversation. There are so many ways to get involved with the History Center, so I look forward to continuing our conversation with you as well. So tonight is a special one. We're marking the 140th anniversary of the first cigar rolled in Ybor City. Truly an emblematic moment for the city, I think we can all agree, and there is no better guide for these stories than Dr. Gary Mormino. He is the Frank E. Duckwall Professor of History Emeritus at University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and one of the leading historians of this state. He's the author of Land of Sunshine, State of Dreams, and The Immigrant World of Ybor City, and recipient of the Florida Humanities Lifetime Achievement Award. We are thrilled to have you back with us to bring the history of Ybor City to life. And we will have time for questions at the end. If you're here with us in Tico Hall, please wait for the microphone so that our Zoom audience can hear your questions. And if you're on Zoom, there's a Q&A feature in the Zoom webinar app. So now, without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Gary Mormino.
Oh my, what a great crowd. I should add, I'm not the only Duckwall Professor Emeritus here tonight. Where are my good friends from USF St. Pete? Please stand. Tom Halleck and Julie Armstrong were Professor Emeritus. They were also Duckwall scholars at this time. I fell in love with Ybor City in 1977. And to be honest, I had never heard of Ybor City. I would probably have said, where is Ybor City? At the moment, I remember when I got the job, I went to the University of Illinois Library and looked it up. And Ybor City has an extraordinary historical record. There must be 36 scholars who have written about Ybor City. I mean, it's irresistible. Italians, Sicilians, Spaniards, Cubans, white and black, in a remarkable industry making cigars by hand. As a young kid, I was not a very good student. I was more interested in jobs to go to college than grades to get into college. And I grew up in has anyone here ever been to Wood River, Illinois? That's my hometown, which has a little Italy. Wood River is basically a company town of Standard Oil Refinery in Wood River, Illinois, on the Mississippi River. And the Mormino family had left Sicily in 1906. And I was extraordinarily lucky. About 30 years ago, I had a Fulbright in Italy, and there were still family members there outside. They had moved from Sicily to outside Rome. And my great uncle was still alive, and he was a young boy at the time, and the 5 brothers were leaving, and he was joining them, and his mother broke down and cried, and he couldn't leave his mother. He went back, but he was still alive. But I asked him, "Do you remember the first letter you received?" They went to Louisiana to cut sugarcane. He said, "Yes." because my mother was crying again. But the first sentence was, in America, il pane è mole, ma la vita è dura. In America, the bread is soft, but life is hard, which would be a great book title, by the way. It's a profound take on America. What a strange country this is. We work like slaves, cutting sugarcane, but we're eating white refined bread. In Italy, you'd be eating hard bread, but nonetheless, how do I work this, by the way? I'm not sure how to help. I should have asked. Oh, wait. Okay, here. That's all right. So I wouldn't be here tonight if it were not for my exposure to the Hill in St. Louis. How many of you have been to the Hill in St. A lot of people. The Hill in St. Louis, or as the locals would say, Dago Hill in St. Louis. And I should add, well, I was a grad student in college, University of North Carolina, and I had decided maybe I'll look at the Hill as a dissertation project. And it was probably 30 miles from my hometown, but I'd never been there. And I drive one Saturday, and I see this huge man with a billy club. Found out he was kind of a night watchman. I rolled down my window. I said, "Excuse me, is this Dago Hill?" And he reached in, pulled me by my shirt till I hit my head on the top of the car. He said, "Kid, you better be Italian." But not cool. But the Hill was half Northern Italian, half Southern Italian. And I went to the Missouri Historical Archives, figuring Len and I had an apartment for the summer there. And I remember waiting, and the lady said, before you go to the archives, you have to ask permission. And there was a survivor from the Titanic there as kind of a grande dame, and she blessed your project. And so I went over, and she said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Italians in St. Louis." And she said, "Why would you want to do that?" Which wasn't an encouraging project. But I found out there were no records there, so I started doing interviews. And that's really what I did in Tampa. There were far more records in Ybor City, but I probably did 150 interviews. I would go down once or twice a week, and just not a single person is alive, by the way, from those interviews. The cover of the book, Ferdy Pacheco, I got to know him pretty well. His family was Ybor City. His father was the Spanish consul. Actually, an uncle was the Spanish consul there. And he had kind of a third chapter in life as an artist, a pretty good artist, by the way. And he painted the cover of the Ybor City book. And that, of course, the man with the book, that's El Lector, the reader in the cigar factory. You have to love an industry, unlettered immigrants, and they paid 25 cents a week and it was an elected position, to read to the workers. And you read in 1 hour shifts 4 times a day. You read the newspaper always in Spanish. All the Italians in Ybor City became fluent in Spanish. That was the lingua franca of Ybor City. And then you read a novel, and it was a selected novel. I mean, what other workers in America were listening to Don Quixote and others? But that's is it green or red? Green, yeah, thank you. The founder of Ybor City, Don Vicente Martinez Ybor, by the way, his first cousin died in World War II. He volunteered, he was Cuban, volunteered for the U.S. Army, and was killed in the South Pacific. Ybor was patron. Interestingly, all the Spaniards in Ybor City were from Asturias or Galicia in the eastern side of Spain. He was from Valencia, from the western side, came over as a young boy in Cuba, worked a variety of jobs, and gradually worked his way up where he was owning small factories. And the politics in Cuba became dicey. And in 1886, he decided to relocate. And someone, Gavino Gutierrez, the fable I don't think is true, but he had come to Tampa to look for guavas. He had heard there were limitless forests, didn't find guavas, but found a pretty good harbor, and he told his friend Ybor, and Ybor relocated his factory. It's really, you can make an argument, as one of the pivotal events in Tampa history. Tampa would be a very different place without Ybor City. That's the first factory. The building still stands. I think it's the oldest brick building in Tampa. It's the Vicente Martinez Ybor factory. Interestingly, now owned by the Church of Scientology. I took a group of students for an Ybor tour about a year ago, and they really hounded us there. It was very, very uncomfortable. You have to love, I used to love walking up. Those are cast iron stairs from 1880s, still durable. If you were here in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, the building housed antique stores, cafes, etc. So a pretty interesting place. That's the original Aya factory, which was wooden. That building is now a brick building behind the Ybor Museum. The Perfecto Garcia factory. I love this. And West Tampa became a spin-off of Ybor City, almost a sister city. And what other factories in America have a bell tower? It has no functional use other than it's beautiful. There's a wonderful word in Italian. The word for Italian church is, or bell tower is campanile, and there's a term called campanilismo, which translates as bell towerness. What would bell tower? And it means don't trust anyone who cannot hear your church bell, meaning don't trust strangers. Probably a good idea today as well. But I think if all the buildings in Ybor City, all the documents were burned by a fire, you could recreate Ybor City with this postcard. I think this is the most informative work. Let me ask you. So, what do you see interesting in that postcard? Anyone? Go ahead. Yes, in the back, please.
If you look at the pillars, they've got water jugs. That was before the fire extinguisher system.
Yes.
They had those particular buckets were round at the bottom, so nobody could put it down. You had to pig it, and they were full of water because the greatest danger the cigar factory had was fire.
The Oracle of West Tampa, E.J. Salcinas. Thank you. Now I see something different, but now this is 1880s, a segregated Florida. I mean, this is in the Constitution. It's not like it's optional. It's an integrated workforce. Now they're Black Cubans, but to most Americans, that really doesn't make a difference. Also, they dress, they're wearing white shirts. It's rather formal considering the weather in Tampa. But the idea that there would be 3 blacks in the front, there's also women there. I'm not sure there's another workforce in America quite like it. And there were scores and scores of factories just like this. This is a more modern version. Notice the hats, rolling the cigars.
Yeah.
The cigar factories, it wasn't just rolling cigars. There was a whole level, several levels. These people were selectors, a very highly skilled position. You selected the proper cigar leaf, the quality of it, for the proper cigar. You don't want to put an expensive leaf on a, imperfect cigar. And so you can see they're selecting the leaves for the binder and for the for the wrapper. So in 1908, I get a call about 20 years ago at USF St. Pete saying this is the, what was the name of the famous labor photographer? Lewis Hine. This was for the Lewis Hine Foundation. He was a labor reformer, and he did his reform through photographs. I mean, would you want your great aunt to be working in a factory at age 9 or 10? I mean, that, and he concluded the best way of combating this was not legislation, but public shame. And he said, we have this famous photograph from Tampa, Florida, but we can't identify him. And I'll show you in a second here. This is the box factory. I'll eventually get to that. This was the most coveted document you carried in your billfold. It identified you as a lector, the reader in the cigar factory. The way it worked, they had no radios then, but cigar work was rather boring. And they'd hire someone to read for 6-8 hours a day. And they'd pay them 25 cents a week. This was a very prestigious position. And you basically got a tryout when you talked for you read for 1 minute, and you were voted on by the cigar, the applause or lack of it from your workers, and you could be excused by the same way that Mormino has lost his passion out. And so the readers had their own identity card. This would get you a good seat in a restaurant. Is this a dandy, by the way? This was also a reader. Now, catch the shoes. Don't you love the shoes? The Count El Conde, the Count. Okay, this is what I was talking about. So Lewis Hine brought his team to Tampa, and everyone told him, go to Ybor City, and they caught this young boy here. You'll notice, look on the left leg, there's a scab. The newspaper is almost as big as the child, and the Lewis Hine Foundation wanted to know, who is the kid? I have no idea. I found out in about 10 minutes. I called 3 or 4 people, including some people in Tampa, and they called back and they said, oh man, well, it's coming up. I forgot his last name here. That's Joe Maniscalco, by the way. He had his own little, quote, factory, small f, in this clothes closet almost. But look at the attention to detail, the pride and craftsmanship in the cigars, how they were rolled, but neatly tied together with string there. This is also a reformed photograph, because if there were laws, and I'm not sure there were laws at that time, no one obeyed them. So if you wanted to pull your kids out of school, no one. My father dropped out of 4th grade. In Illinois, that was against the law, but no one really cared. These are all kids who worked at a cigar factory. I'll eventually get to that photograph, by the way. It's here. This was a medical clinic in Ybor City, and also at one time a mutual aid society. No, Rene Salazar. That's his mutual aid society card. This was very serious. If you were Cuban, you belonged to a Circolo Cubano, Italian, l'Unione Italiana. There were 2 Spanish clubs, El Centro Español, El Centro Asturiano. Depending upon your nationality, where you immigrated from in Spain in this case, but also your preferences. These were. I remember as a young professor seeing Ybor for the first time. My jaw dropped. These are mutual aid societies. These are cathedrals. These are cathedrals for the working classes. They had dance halls. The first day I arrived, I went to the Italian club up to the 4th floor, and there must have been 20 pigeons living on the 4th floor of the Italian club. That was the dance floor. I still thought it was extraordinary, even the pigeons. But you kept your identity card here. That's a mutual aid society, not a library, not a a palace. That's for the Spaniards from Asturias. Look at that. That's how many of you have never been in that building? Never been. Most people here have been in the building. That's good. I expected far fewer hands. Not only did you have mutual aid societies where you had dances, where you could get a café con leche, play cards and dominoes, most of the clubs had hospitals. We're talking about modern hospitals. I would argue Ybor City immigrants had the best medical care of anyone in Florida. You hired one or two doctors to be exclusively with you. And of course, who's the most famous Ybor City physician of them all? There's not even close. Frank Adamo. It's not Adamo, by the way, it's Adamo. Adamo Drive. He was a Sicilian immigrant who had very little schooling. He went to Chicago to roll cigars there and then enrolled in medical school and came back and worked at the clinics. During World War II, he's captured by the Japanese at Bataan and saves many lives working with this was gruesome place to be in World War II. But look at that, the fountain. That's, I think, on the doors of Centro Asturiano. This is the cantina where I remember going as a young man. Oh, my God, the men playing dominoes, drinking cafe, swearing, playing. It's just, and I did a lot of interviews in the cantinas there. But look, I mean, I think this is actually Centro Español downtown, I think. EJ, is that right?
Yeah, that's the same US.
Okay, West Tampa. Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, that's also extraordinary. You had two Centro Españols, one in Ybor City, one in West Tampa. I did some interviews there. The Cuban Club downtown. Look at that. That's majestic. And l'Unione Italiana also. I can't speak for all the clubs, but I know several are in dire straits now. The clubs, I think the city of Tampa should have been far more generous in maintaining them, helping them, but they were at their peak, from the 20s to the 40s and 50s. Many, for instance, the Italian club, if you were a member in World War II, they sent you a bulletin on what your colleagues are doing, where they are in Europe or Asia. That's the Centro Español in West Tampa. What a magnificent building. That is, look at that. That's a mutual aid society for immigrants. Who else does that in America today?
Nice.
That's the exterior. You got to love the Spanish flourish there. A view of Ybor City from the air. A lot of people slept on their porches in Ybor City. The houses were. Ybor City also had a small Jewish population, which is interesting. You can see it, Simovitz, Stein on the outside. And around the corner, it's really not part of Ybor City, but it's a stone's throw from the Centro Soriano, is the German-American Club, where during the 1940s, half the members were Jewish.
Tampa
had a German-Jewish community that is often forgotten. The Ybor School in Ybor City, I took that. It's in much worse shape than El Pasaje. I've got a story. You're not going to believe it. On my heart, on my mother's soul, this is a true story. So I hadn't been in Ybor City long, and I just making my first full raise in looking at people to interview, and someone invites me to a reception at the El Pasaje. It means the passage in Spanish. I mean, it's just a magnificent, look at this. The cast iron wrought on mid floor, they're gone now, but At that time in 1977, only two people lived in that entire building, a man called the General, Jose Avellanal, and his mother, who was like 100 years old. And so I go to a reception, and I'm not invited, but there's a lot of people there. And the General sees me and sees I don't have a name tag, and I thought he was going to bludgeon me to death with his cane. He said, "Young man, get out of here." And I'd back up a second. I asked him if I could interview him. And he said, "Young man, you are impertinent. First of all, I am not a sir, I am a general. And you've disrespected, get out of," and he hectors me across the dance. People are separating. I felt like being cast from Eden. And then there's a reception about a month later. There's no way he's going to remember me, right? So I go to the reception. He sees me across the room and sprints to kick me out. Okay, I realized I wasn't being ethical, but so honestly, two nights later, 2 a.m, I get a phone call. This is Officer O'Brien, Tampa Police Department. I thought I paid that traffic ticket. He said, "The General has died." Seriously. I'm thinking, how does he? And he said, "I should tell you, so I'm dating a student in your class, and she told me about your misfortune with the General." And the General, and then he says, "Any police officers here, is this legal?" He said, "I shouldn't be doing this, but you have 24 hours. You can take anything you want out of the building." He has no heirs. Well, I didn't take anything for myself. I got the folks from the Special Collections, USF Tampa. We took the van there. Oh my God. First of all, he's a very naughty man. He had, I can't even tell you what he had there. But one of the things that was there was all the records from the WPA from the 1930s. They had rented a room there, had simply left and kept the rent. So we got all that. We got thousands and thousands of valuable documents, and the famous General. Thank you. This, I think this may have come out of there. Phil was Lo Cicero. It should be Lo Cicero. It's and in Sicily they used that to see if you were Italian. It's hard to pronounce for non-natives. It's not Lo Cicero, it's Lo Cicero. Phil was an amazing guy, and I think he gave me this, or he got this out of the same, but it's a Chinese dream book, La Cena Charada. And you bet your dream, you bet your dream. So there, if you dreamt of an elephant, you bet number 9, Elefante. And how many of your families had a dream book? A few? Did it work?
No.
Phil Lo Cicero, by the way, how many of you can match this? He interviewed Fidel Castro. He had lunch with Fidel Castro in the 1950s in Ybor City. He's the one who told me, let me think if I can get this. Oh, it will come to me later. Coffee in Ybor City. Almost everyone I interviewed mentioned coffee if they were immigrants, saying in Sicily, in northeastern Spain, coffee was so expensive, so difficult to get. You might drink it on Christmas and your birthday. In America, we throw away coffee. Coffee was so inexpensive and such a luxury. And of course, cafe con leche became the style. But I love that shot. Just simple pleasures of life, having an espresso or a cafe con leche. Jose Marti, our expert on Jose Marti is in the back. I won't discuss him. And this is probably one of the 10 most famous photographs in Ybor City. It's Jose Marti amid his patriots, and he's exactly in the middle, upper 2/3, the man with the thick mustache. if you go straight up from here, and that's Marti there. How many of you have been to Marti Park? I once went about 30 years ago. USF invited some Cuban scholars to give a talk, and there was a great deal of protest from the Cuban American community. And I had agreed to give the scholars a tour of Ybor City. And we arrived at Marti Park, and there must have been a dozen really tough-looking guys. And I thought, this is good, where I have to call the police out. Fortunately, no bloodshed, but the art of chromolithography, one of the great art forms for cigar labels. They love beautiful women, classical lore, Cuba Libre, free Cuba with the Cuban flag there. You can see Spanish misrule, the frying pan. How many of you have read Sarah McNamara's new book on the Spanish Civil War? She's a fabulous young scholar. That's one of the best things about the profession is you see young scholars knowing a lot more than you knew when you were young. But she has a new book out on the famous Women's March, and she almost single-handedly helped finance a mural of this in Ybor City. I remember people talking to me that the church in Spain obviously was very right-wing, backing Franco, and that if you went to church, there were people taking attendance. If you were attendee, they held it against you. That's how serious Spanish Civil War was. This is Fidel. Who's the man to the left of Fidel? Victoriano Manteiga, Roland Mantega's father, and that's Fidel in 1955 when he came to Tampa. The art of the cigar label, that's beautiful. If you took out a year's subscription to the Tampa Times, the afternoon paper, they gave you a box of Tampa Times cigars. Good advertising, by the way. Aragona, they loved beautiful women. They weren't the idealized beauty of our lifetime. These were not thin women. Victor Hugo, I think, from the people I talked to, was the favorite author of the cigar makers. His heroes were your heroes. His villains were your villains. The unethical businessman, the student poet who protested, etc. And they honored him with a cigar label. Olinda. Arguably, this would be an interesting program to talk about. What were the 10 worst decisions in the history of Tampa, or the 10 most controversial? But looking back at it, the decision of urban renewal, which really was urban removal in Ybor City, disastrous. I interviewed, I've forgotten his name, I had this in the book, a couple. He was still alive, but he told me that the authorities came and said, you have 24 hours to move out. Your house is being destroyed tomorrow. And his wife said, I can't. And she was dead by morning break. Broken heart. And that's from they leveled entire blocks. The irony of ironies, this is 1961. I hadn't talked much about World War II, but you had Ybor City, West Tampa, both had large numbers of eligible draftees, and they were patriots. And they went in, they came back, many of them came back with brides they had met abroad or at home. But what was missing in Ybor City especially was housing, adequate housing. They had not really built much housing at all. Moreover, does your new bride want to live in Ybor City, a neighborhood clearly in design by this time? And, it's real tragedy in so many ways. Now, that's one of the good news. This was decades later, but when they widened the interstate, rather than destroying all the homes, they donated one. If you're familiar with Ybor City, where the museum is, 2 doors down is this house here, which is they've done a splendid job of rehabbing it. Again, that was a perfectly good brick building. Then why would you tear a brick building down? Some more cigar labels. Shakespeare. How many does Donald Duck orange juice? Did they ever think about Shakespeare orange juice? I don't think so. Cristoforo Colombo. Rigoletto. Champ Clark. Now, why would you do a cigar label on the Vice President of the United States, the U.S. Senator from Missouri? That's the reason is because the cigar industry is always looking for favors or tariffs, etc. So why not dedicate a cigar label to someone you have to suck up to?
Okay.
These are the 3 explorers. Columbus, Ponce de Leon. Who's the 3rd? I'm not sure. Another explorer. I love the labels, just the novelty. A little suggestive there. Boccaccio. Why don't we have Boccaccio peas or Boccaccio baked beans? I almost weep when I look at that. Going into the mutual aid societies or the clubs themselves, often you found men playing chess or a variety of games. And I could take groups of 20 students in on a Saturday morning, and they could interview the workers. We'd get a coffee there. Good luck getting into the building now. All the mutual aid societies die. I mean, it's just a difficult time. They're playing dominoes there. I mean, one of my first interviews, I had a full mane of hair. These are 3 people I interviewed over about 10 years at the Italian Club. The guy at the far right, I forgot his name, he was in Texas when the famous Spindletop Gusher, he was in Spindletop, Texas. His Italian immigrant family went there. So this is the greatest oil gusher in American history. And this is almost 100 years later. He's in Ybor City, but they were there every day at the club. And I interviewed them countlessly. The Monet factory, the largest wooden factory in Ybor City. And here's the Monet factory today, condos. Well, that's mid-transit. Well, wait, I swear I had, I thought I had a photograph of the new condos there. They did a miraculous job, I must admit, of updating that. The casitas were homes they didn't destroy, but they donated to the Ybor City Museum. And they're great fun to go into, particularly the kitchens. You can see what a 1900 kitchen was like. And they have, you can see how they made coffee with this huge knot of wool, et cetera, that served as a filter. And they have a sign there. It looks like a raffle ticket. It's 25, 50, 75, 100 in quartiles. Why would you put that on the porch? Ice. How much ice you wanted, how many pounds of ice you wanted. Am I bad? No, I think. Time for questions. How are we doing time-wise? How many minutes do I have?
About 15 more minutes for questions.
Questions are, I'd even much rather hear your family story. Let me ask again, how many of your families lived in Ybor City at one time or West Tampa? Looks like about a fifth of the audience. Any stories you care to tell? Yes.
I got one of a actually have a micro. Oh, sorry. For some reason, my father, Frank Gonzalez, from the Centro Turiano, we went to El Pasaje, ended up at Avellanas, and he had a chair there. It was gorgeous, and I said, oh, how pretty. 2 nights later, there's a knock on my door. He brought the chair to me. So that was very nice of him. He was weird.
Don't go on. Stay there. Stay there.
I'm not.
Well, first, I have your book, so I would like you to sign it if you don't mind.
Please, I'm honored.
But one thing is that the man that you had interviewed, Wilford Rodriguez.
Yes.
That is my mother's uncle.
Really?
And my grandfather were lectors. And then Joe Maniscalco, I know him. His brother and his wife used to babysit me when I was young. So it's kind of neat to have this connection.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that.
And I love your book.
You're kind.
It's wonderful.
You're kind. I wish my co-author were here. You'll notice it was Gary Mormino and George Pizzetta. We had met, and George's family was Northern Italian from the Piedmont, and we met in grad school at the University of North Carolina, and we both had Fulbrights in 1980. So we went down several times to Sicily to interview Sicilians. And we'd go on Saturday morning, all the peasants would be there drinking coffee, and we'd interview them, and they would mock us unceasingly for how bad our Italian was. I mean, they were just cruel.
Sit down.
Yes, please. Ben.
So I know you talked about the history of a few of the cigar labels and the stories behind why they created them for the vice president and stuff like that. I know the History Center has a large collection of the labels. J.C. Newman does as well. Is there a larger archive of cigar labels that the public can see?
Does anyone know the answer? I should know the answer, but I do not. USF has a huge collection. I've gotten them a lot of cigar labels, but whether there's a central clearinghouse.
But the Newmans have some.
The Newmans must have, yeah, they do, because one of my students works at the one near the bakery there, and he showed me some of theirs before. You have to realize they produce millions of these, so there's a lot of cigar labels out there, and they became very fashionable about 30, 40 years ago. Ma'am, please.
Ma'am.
Oh, okay, yes.
I would like you to tell the story.
How we met?
No, not how we met.
That's my Wi-Fi.
No, I'd like you to tell the story that you told when we were having dinner a few minutes ago. The phone call you got at your office.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the day the book is published, I am so happy. I've got an office in the library, and I get a call about 8:30 in the morning. And it's kind of a stern voice on you. He said, "Are you one of the co-authors of that book?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, this is Pardo was his last name. I can't remember." He said, "Would you turn to page 144 and read the paragraph at the bottom?" I said, it read, "Among the prominent anarchists in Ybor City were like and Fernando Pardo." He said, "That's my father." He said, "You called my father an anarchist." He said, "Are you going to be in your office a few hours?" And yes, he said, "I'm going to come by and kick your ass." Seriously.
Seriously, not?
And so I called my co-author, George Pizzetta, who wrote that. I didn't even write that section. And he looks, he said, he was a member of the Anarchist Society. So he comes by and he's bouncing off the walls. I mean, he really is. He's hurt so badly. He doesn't He doesn't hurt me, fortunately. And he said, I want you to meet my 4 brothers. And so we met for lunch, the 5 Pardo brothers, and they had all the father was a World War II hero, by the way, had all these documents. And we met 3 or 4 times, always at remember Alvarez Restaurant in Ybor City? Oh, God, that was wonderful place near the community college. And I've lost where I was going from there. Sorry, but
We actually have a.
oh yes. What about
The moral of the story is what they did with that information.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So 3 months later, I get this huge package from the Pardo brothers, and I open it up, and they had done a book about their father called Our Father, the Anarchist. And they concluded, yes, our father was an anarchist, but he was a good and honorable man and deserves to be remembered. Thank you for reminding me.
Of course. We also have a question from our online audience that we'd love to share as well. This is quite a unique one. I'm going to make sure I don't mess it up, so I'm going to read directly here. Arguably, Tampa is settled very similarly to New Orleans, especially if you consider the ethnic Spanish influence and large influx of Sicilians. So the question comes in, why is it that there's such a strong Catholic tradition in New Orleans? And an example is, they have Mardi Gras. We invented Gasparilla.
Yeah. I should point out, by the way, I have 4 sisters. One of my sisters is a cloistered nun, a poor Claire. So I'm glad she's not listening tonight. But I'm not exactly sure. EJ, do you have a take on that, on why anti-clericalism, which just means anti-priest, anti-Catholicism, was so rampant in Ybor? I'm unfamiliar with the other place she's talking about. I'm curious to get, this is EJ Salsinas, our esteemed West Tampa Oracle.
Among the Spaniards, I can't speak for the Sicilians, but among the Spaniards, the women went to church, not the men. The men would tell you that they had come from Spain very suspicious of their local priest, because the priest always identified with the rich families of the town, and the priests always identified with La Guardia Civil, the local police. And the men were always concerned that the priest would listen to confession and pass on information to La Guardia Civil. And the Spaniards here wanted nothing to do with police. So the men did not go to church. The women did. Their children, in the great majority, went to parochial school. But during the Civil War, Gary, we used to have people that would stand in the corner to see what Latin children were going to Catholic schools, because there was a very anti-Catholic church attitude at that time. The war came, and there are no atheists during the war. So you'd be surprised how many men started attending church and became more Catholic. Also the Spanish were influenced by the Protestant movement in Tampa. We had a lot of Methodist, we had a lot of Baptist, and we had Congregationist. I think that's the pronunciation. And they would have schools so that when you were walking to the cigar factory, you can drop off your kids, say, to Rosa Valdez Methodist settlement and so forth. That gives you some idea of the religious. And we had a huge Jewish presence, and they got along very well with the Spanish, and the Spanish got along very well. In fact, We used to have some Latin girls marrying Jewish men and Jewish women marrying Latin men. Not publicized, but that did occur. So we had one fantastic melting pot.
AJ, to add to that, I've heard that during the Spanish Civil War, the Gaspard family was more conservative, and many people boycotted the Columbia restaurant because of their support. Have you heard this?
Not familiar with that, Gary.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, please.
I have Spanish nationality. My Spanish side, Henry, my cigar maker. That's it, Mike.
Oh, my Spanish side grandfather was a cigar maker, and his wife was a cigar maker. I've never met a more radical man in my life than my grandfather. And he had a favorite story. And this is probably why a lot of the immigrants, because they lived like he did, but he has a favorite story how they were farmers in Spain. He was from Galicia, and he had to raise pigs. And they couldn't eat the pigs because they had to sell it for money. And he said, my father would go give a ham to the church when we could have been eating that ham. And that was one reason why they hated it, I'm sure, And he became an expert at carving hams as he lived in Tampa as a cigar maker. But the man hated the Catholic Church, and he had three brothers, and one of them lived in St. Augustine, the other one lived in Tampa also, and those brothers were just like him. And they hated the Catholic Church. They hated the leaders of Spain at that time because they would work like animals and then have to give away the good parts that they might be eating themselves. But that was his story. The Sicilians weren't even, I'm half Sicilian. The Sicilians weren't even as radical as the Spaniards that I met in my lifetime. And that was not uncommon in the Ybor City among the Spaniards at that time.
There's a book, a pretty rare book out there now called The Wonderful World of Angelo Massari. Angelo Massari was a businessman, an immigrant from Ybor City. But he tells a story. He returns to Sicily after he had become wealthy and expected a lot more recognition, but he lined up for confession, and all the big shots in the community would go in front of him. There was a man who allowed the people to interrupt him, and he was outraged by that. It's interesting if there were a young Gary Mormino now interested in writing a history of Ybor City. The good news is you've got a tremendous amount of secondary sources. There must be at least a half a dozen or more books, and that's not including testimonials, autobiographies. The bad news, of course, is there's almost no one to interview now. You'd be interviewing the grandchildren of immigrants, which could be helpful, but it was just a different world then. I feel so lucky. Thank you, Betty Castor, for allowing me to do this. Where's Betty? Thank you. Speaking of meaningful leaders and people in your lives, I'm anxious to hear more of your stories. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you so much. This has been very, very interesting. I'm born and raised here in Tampa. I have Sicilian, Spanish, and Cuban descent. And I happen to be a nurse who has been very blessed to teach nursing at the University of South Florida and to teach physician assistants at the University of Tampa. And when I've had the opportunity to discuss about healthcare, one of the things I've always brought up was the mutual aid societies, especially I have beautiful photos of Centro Asturiano, where when my grandparents came here, There was no Medicaid. There were no food stamps. It was an amazing group of people who worked together to help each other succeed. And the health care that was provided for a nominal amount of money every month, and it provided them everything from doctor visits to surgery to childbirth. And I proudly announced to all my students that here at Centro Turiano is truly the first HMO in the United States, where we took care of ourselves, we took care of each other. And it is of great pride to be able to teach the young people now, the future healthcare generations, both through USF and at the University of Tampa. And I take great pride in all our immigrants who came here not knowing English and truly built such an absolute wonderful environment for people like me to grow up in.
Well, beautiful. Very eloquent.
Ari, I wanted to follow up with her comments. You have a wonderful picture of the Centro Español Hospital on Bayshore. Could you flip that and show us that hospital? It has a great history. The Centro Español Hospital that you're about to see was built between 1904 and 1906. And we are about to celebrate here in Tampa. We are about to celebrate the centennial of Tampa General Hospital. There. Please consider that we're about to celebrate the centennial of the opening of Tampa Municipal Hospital, which we now call Tampa General. This hospital, as she has correctly said, was serving the people 20 years before Tampa General. And one of the directors of this hospital was an Anglo by the name of Dr. Mac Winton.
Yes.
Dr. Mac Winton was so respected in the medical society that he became president of the Hillsborough Medical Society. But the pressure was for him to stop serving the mutual aid societies, to the point that he was blackballed from the Tampa Medical Society because he was serving what they called socialized medicine. It was not socialized medicine. And to take you one step further, this man, Mac Winton, there is a bust of Mac Winton in the Centro Español Memorial Cemetery adjacent to Myrtle Hill and Garden of Memories. He would go to Clara Fry in the evenings. He would take care of the black people at Clara Fry's hospital or a rooming house that she had converted to take care of the blacks over in the area where Blake High School is now located. If the black man or woman had some complication, Mac Winton would put that black citizen in his car at night after Tampa General had closed down for the day. He would drive in through the back. He would use the surgery room to take care of the colored lady or colored man, put them back in the car, take them back to Clara Fry's hospital, for rehab or whatever. No one ever found out that Mac Winton, a white physician with excellent reputation and excellent competent skills, was using Tampa General late at night to take care of black citizens. That gives you a little idea.
Stirring stories, no less. I think that may be it. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. I mean,